Thank you. So, I do my talk titles in advance, and I put this up a few weeks ago, and Brianna and I got back from New York on Monday, late afternoon, early evening, and came in the next morning, and Dr. Susan, as soon as I walked in, said, "Did you hear?" And I said, "No, I didn't hear it." Told me about Virginia. And, your mind starts to go a few places in a moment like that. And then I began to think about what's going on Sunday, and it sounds like we're getting some feedback. Can we turn it down a little bit? And I thought, what's my topic? And it was, thou art that, which the Sanskrit is Tat Tvam Asi, which means thou art that, or I am that. And that is that thing of oneness, that eternal, infinite thing that we call God or Spirit. And I thought, okay, that can work. Because one of the things that we, as human beings, have a great difficulty accepting is, what is the meaning of our death? What not only what happens, I mean, that's a big question, and the answer seems to be, I don't know. We don't really know what happens. We have some people that'll tell you what happens, but we don't know. But so many of the great teachings, the great spiritual teachings of the world, have talked about this idea of oneness, of eternality, that everything is part of one, and that the only thing that really changes is the form. And we can see that if we pay attention to the world around us, that things change form. But the molecules, the atoms that make up that original form just go into other form. They don't disappear. They don't cease to exist. The energy that you are, we say energy can neither be created nor destroyed once the universe gets going. But everything within the universe changes, doesn't it? Everything changes form. Even beyond physical form. You ever had a relationship that changed form? Anybody? You ever had one that didn't? We change who we are. We change how we see the world. We change how we think. When you change, there's a saying in our teaching, change your thinking, change your life. And that's true whether you do it intentionally or unintentionally. When you're a little kid, you stop seeing yourself as a first grader and start seeing yourself as a second grader, and the world looks very different and becomes very different for you because it is. So change is that one thing that permeates everything on the physical plane. And it's also something that's fairly difficult to predict in many cases, especially in the human experience. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, do you? We think we do. We kind of, sometimes we get the idea, that we know how our life's going to turn out. We know what's going to come up this week. We know what's going to happen. But if you pay attention, you'll see that all kinds of things that were unexpected show up, or things that were expected don't show up. And then the life is different. So this idea of oneness, I think, becomes very important to understanding the impermanence of the human experience, that we are part of something that is permanent, but the element of us that is permanent is not directly accessible. We can get glimpses of it sometimes in things we might call a mystical experience, or in deep meditation or something like that. You can get a glimpse of that oneness, even have an experience of it, but it's fleeting. It's ephemeral. It's like chasing a shadow. So we live in duality, or what I like to call two-ness, where the appearance is that I'm here and you're there, where the appearance is that we're separate and individual, when in reality we're not separate, we're individualized, arising out of the same thing, which our senses don't communicate to us very well. So some of the great teachers have talked about this idea of oneness. I found this online. It says, oneness speaks through the intimate reflection of our own individual nature. The world is mirror. The world mirrors back to us who we are. Who we are in the sense of who we've decided we are, or we've, become, not necessarily who we authentically are. But that's what the world does. It continually mirrors back what you're projecting out, with the idea being, I think, ultimately, that when you figure that that's what's going on, you learn to use that mirroring to make inner adjustments so that you become more and more the authentic version of you. Of course, I don't think a lot of people get that, because that's not what we teach our kids in school, is it? Rumi, the great mystical poet, said, I am the life of life. I am that cat, this stone, no one. I see and know all times and all worlds as one, always one, oneness always. Now, Rumi is who lived in like the 12th century, is the best-selling poet in America. I don't think a lot of Americans know he was Islamic. But that could affect sales. But why is that? Because his poems are mistaken for romantic poems between two people. And they can be used for that. Works that way. But that's not what he wrote. He wrote about an ecstatic relationship with what he called the beloved, which is spirit, as the reality of life. That includes all of life, the part we like and the part we don't. The happiness, the sadness, the fullness and the loss. And he talks about getting drunk on the wine of the realization that the beloved is closer than my next breath. And we read that in a dualistic sense, and we say, oh, I don't know, maybe he's talking about romance. But he's using his art to help illuminate that veil that Ernest Holmes talked about, the veil that separates us from that true experience of self. It's hard to understand. It's hard to accept, because when you leave your house in the morning to go to work, oneness probably isn't on your mind. Traffic is. The stuff you're going to deal with when you get to the office or get to wherever you work is. Or if you work at home, you're going to think about, do I leave my bathrobe on or take it off as I'm going to be working today, Or all those things, we get into that daily routine of life, which is not something we shouldn't do, but it's something that doesn't lend itself to an everyday idea of all is one. And then we have an experience that rattles us, and we forget about the oneness. And we feel alone, we feel disconnected, we feel cheated because something's happened that doesn't make sense, that doesn't seem fair. And how do we reconcile that? So many people have left more traditional versions of a religious path because the God that was represented seems capable of fairness but doesn't deliver it. Seeing God as the micromanager of the universe sets you up for disappointment, because the micromanager is doing a whole lot of stuff that ain't very pleasant, that isn't very godlike. Why doesn't God stop me from doing the worst things that I do? Is the devil that gets in me more powerful? We try to figure it out over the years. You can look at the history of religious belief, and what you can see is an evolving human consciousness that ultimately needs to get to the point that we are our own authority and we have within us everything we need. But that's a hard message for some of us to hear, because we don't believe that's so, and we don't trust ourselves. We need the disciplinarian in the sky to keep us threatened. Because Lord knows if we're left to our own devices, we'll just run amok. Everyone would just go to Cancun. But no, that's not what happens, is it? As you realize that you're your own authority, you begin to step into that authority in a bigger way, and you live a life that's more authentic than any you could live under the imagined idea of a threat from a deity that abandoned you in the Garden of Eden. I am the life of life. I am that cat. This stone, no one. It's one of those Zen koans, it sounds like, right? Where, what's the sound of one hand clapping? And those are things that aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to help you understand that you live in a mystery. There's a wonderful story I like to tell. Years ago, there was in a town in the Eastern Asia, there was a Cossack that would patrol this particular plaza in the town to make sure that people were behaving themselves, no one was stealing and so forth. And this rabbi would come through the town square every morning, and he'd come out of this street and he'd go across the plaza and go down that street, right about the same time. And the rabbi didn't like the Cossack didn't like rabbis very much, so one day he went up to him and he says, "Rabbi, where are you going?" The rabbi says, "I don't know." He says, "What do you mean you don't know? Where are you going?" He says, "I don't know." He says, "Rabbi, every day you come down that street, you walk across the plaza, you go down that street. You tell me you don't know where you're going?" "No, I don't. I don't know where I'm going." So he takes the rabbi and puts him in jail. And the rabbi says, "Excuse me," as he walks away. "Yes, I told you I didn't know where I was going." But we don't. We don't know where we're going. We think we know where we're going. We think we know what tomorrow is going to be like. We think we know what the morning will bring. And, you know, we're right often enough that we keep up the illusion. But it is an illusion. Wayne Dyer would tell a story. He lived in Fort Lauderdale for a long time, and he'd be walking down the beach, just taking a walk. And someone would recognize him. One time a woman recognized him. "Oh, Dr. Dyer, how are you?" You know, and engages him in conversation. And she says, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm taking a walk. I'm going down the..." "Well, how far do you think you're going to go?" He goes, "I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it. I'm just walking." "Well, what if you get too far and you don't want to walk back?" He says, "I'll get a cab." And he said the issue was she needed to know where he was going. She couldn't accept that he didn't know, and therefore she wouldn't know. And sometimes we're so afraid to have that unknown in our life, we don't even want to know what the person walking by is doing. "Where are you going? What are you doing?" You know, and maybe you can get a job as a hall monitor and be fulfilled, but... You know, are you going to finish those French fries? "I don't know." "Are you going to take some?" You know. And we're so afraid sometimes of the "I don't know," when ultimately that's the normal truth. That's the normal truth. We don't know. But we need to have intentions. We need to move forward. It's not like you say, "Well, let me just see what happens." No, you need to have intentions, but you have to also understand that the deeper truth of our reality is that it's a mystery. Virginia doesn't wake up one morning. Who saw that coming? And how do we deal with it when it does happen? You see? If I don't begin with the recognition that it's all a mystery anyway, then I feel cheated. I think something was done to me, you know, that I was picked out. My father used to have a saying, said, "There's a little black cloud that just follows me around and rains on me all the time." That's how he saw his life. He saw himself as a victim of circumstances, a victim of more powerful people. And he lived that. You see, because it became his truth. That's what he reflected out to the world. That's what the world mirrored back. He didn't take it as a lesson. He took it as a reality, as an inevitability. And the universe said, "Right you are." Vivekananda said, All differences in this world are of degree and not of kind, because oneness is the secret of everything. If you think of something in the universe that is as different from you as you can imagine, whatever that would be, it's made of the same stuff you are. Same kind of atoms, operating under the same physical laws as you. If you took both you and that thing you're thinking is the farthest thing from you apart, down to the atomic level, you wouldn't be able to tell one from the other. So how does one become you and one become that thing or that person or that idea, that separate, that rock or whatever it is? Except for the radiating intelligence coming from the one and diversifying into the many. But the same thing. Be like looking at the fingers on your hand and saying, well, index finger, you're nothing like the thumb. You couldn't possibly be related or connected in any way. Right? And you say, that's silly. Because I can see they're both part of the hand. I can't see that you and I are part of the same thing because it's beyond my sensory capacity to see it. But I can know it because I can experience it if I do my spiritual work, if I do the inner work to come to that knowledge. It's there. And it's knowledge that has been shared across every spectrum of every culture in human history. Russell Brand, one of my favorite metaphysicians. And I should probably do this with a British accent. But he says it's difficult to believe in yourself because the idea of self is an artificial construction. You are, in fact, part of the glorious oneness of the universe. Everything beautiful in the world is within you. Now, why do I need Russell Brand to tell me that? Not that he isn't a brilliant being, because clearly he is. But isn't this something that should have been told to me from the moment I showed up? By every parent, every teacher, every aunt, every uncle, every friend, every employer, every coach? Isn't this something we should all just know? And if you'd heard it now, you'd say, of course. See, if you walk down the street in Los Angeles and you say, I am God, you might get some funny looks. If you walk down the street in Topeka, Kansas and say, I am God, you might go to jail. If you walk down the street in India and you say, I am God, and they'll say, yeah, of course you are. Duh. Right? Some version of that, because it's so accepted. And we hear something like this, and it may not even be something you'd be comfortable sharing with those closest to you, because of our social conventions that say we're distinct, we're apart, and we're unworthy. I want to deputize all of you today as an MBU, a mobile blessing unit. And as I raise your right hand. I promise and declare to take on the office of Mobile Blessing Unit and to defend and protect my soul and the souls of others by reminding them of who they are as I remember who I am. Now go forth and bless people. Tell them things like this. And there's no badges or anything like that. You don't get a special ID card. No arrest power. Believe me, arrest power is overrated. I've had it. But what if you just decided to bless people? And you don't have to go up and say, I bless you. You go up and say, how are you doing today? Is there anything I can do to make your day better? You know, if you're in line at the bank and the teller's having a rough customer before you, can you help that teller improve their experience? Can you be the good customer? There was a great saying, it's going around Facebook last couple days, maybe you're getting bad customer service because you're a bad customer. But can I see myself as having not only the authority, but in fact the human duty to uplift the situations I find myself in, at least to attempt it. The tricky part is not to be too attached to how other people respond. Everything beautiful in the world is within you. Everything beautiful in the world is within you. And there are people that would say a statement like that is blasphemy. But they're the ones that believe in the micromanaging God. And if their God is really the true God, that God is not a very efficient God, effective God, or a good God, right? Screwing stuff up right and left. No wonder people walk away from that idea. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel right in your heart. You know, let me give you a quick Bible interpretation class, or Quran interpretation class, or Upanishads interpretation class. When you read something in sacred script that doesn't feel resonant in your heart, go with your heart, because your heart knows the truth. And the people that wrote those books didn't all the time. Great wisdom in there, but you got to wander through a lot of weeds. And the problem is people don't see the difference between the weeds and the wisdom, and they give them equal value. And we end up with wars, and we end up with people being mistreated and cruelty and all the other stuff that happens, all the human suffering that comes out of not understanding to follow your own inner truth. This is a little diagram of oneness. One, many, null, one, all. In other words, everything that exists, everything that goes in and out of form is all arising out of the same thing. And it's a pattern of creation that this physical universe is a part of. And that's what's going on all the time. If you could get down to the atomic level, if you were like the size, say you were the size of an electron. And what you would see, the electrons around you would be popping in and popping out. See, an atom doesn't look like that old model of the solar system like when I went to school. It's like a cloud with electrical charges. And even the nucleus, they've discovered, appears and disappears. The electrons pop in here and pop out and pop in over here. And they call it the quantum leap. But when they pop out and pop in, they don't go through the space in between. They literally leave physical existence and here and come back in over here. And that's happening inside you right now, so many quadrillion times a second you couldn't even calculate it. And you think you're solid. We are made of quantum stuff. The reality we think is reality is a version that we've created and projected out of what we can determine through our senses. And we don't even do that very accurately. We live in a mystery that we just don't even begin to understand. How do I come to terms with that? Well, I have to work at it. I have to work at it because people want answers, right? When's that budget report going to be due? I don't know, said the rabbi, right? My intention is it'll be ready Tuesday. But who the hell knows what's going to happen between now and Tuesday? So we don't live in denial. We move forward with our intentions, but we recognize that they're on shifting ground. You know, the whole earth, we're on a planet full of tectonic plates. Just think about how silly that is. Plates that are moving and shifting. You know, in 150 million years, LA will be part of Alaska. Because the plates are going to move that far in 150 million years. So better get some winter clothes. And, you know, well, that's a long time. I probably won't be here in this form then. absent some technological marvel. So should I even think about that? No, but there's a concept. Are we standing on solid ground? No. It's just temporarily solid. It's moving. You're moving. It's all moving. Everything's moving. Everything's popping in and out, showing up here, disappearing, showing up there. It's even hard to say what you are. In reality, you're an ephemeral group of assembled atoms that held together by some inner intelligence that at some point is going to evacuate this physical being and go on to another existence, like you would take off your raincoat at the end of the day. So how do I identify what I am in that understanding? Dr. Holmes, in his usual long-winded way, says, if you will take time daily to sense, I don't know where that came from, sense the presence of life within you, to believe in it, to accept it, it will not be long before the gift of life which you have known will gradually disappear and something new will be born. A bigger, better, and more perfect you. You will pass from death into life, from lack and want into greater freedom, from fear into faith. From a sense of being alone, you will pass into a realization of oneness with everything, and you will rejoice in this oneness. So we are encouraged to do that deep work, to open our hearts, to accept that we don't really need to know how things are going to unfold because we can't anyway. But still to go forward with that intentionality, to be present in every moment, and to be open to the possibility that the next moment may be very different than this one in a way you never would have imagined. And then we gradually, in doing that, in being simply willing to get out on the skinny branches like that, and not need life to be one neat little package of predictability, you open to a greater strength within you that comes forward and lets you live at that level without fear, other than the fear of being in the unknown, which is a normal thing. I wonder where this is leading is a good thing to ask every morning. I wonder what today is going to turn out to be. What surprises are in store for me? Am I open and receptive? No matter what, even if there's some pain involved. And there will be, you know, there will be. It's part of the deal. You signed up for it. But it's all part of the same package unfolding. It's all part of the revelation of the greater self, that eternal nature of you, that as you bring it closer to the surface of your life, you are enriched beyond measure. So mobile blessing units, go forth and bless the world you encounter, beginning with yourself. Thank you. And namaste.